Climate change down here in the Mediterranean region has been affecting us for more than a decade.
Over the past few vintages, we have been greatly impacted by climate change, especially by the sequence of dramatic weather events.
We lost 60% of our crop due to smoke-tainted wildfires, and my father at Continuum lost 100% of his crop.
We've just recently had our first frost in a while.
We have more extremes. We have drier conditions, we have wetter conditions, we have cooler conditions, we have hotter conditions. But it's difficult to put your finger on it.
Exponential increases in carbon, plastic, and chemical pollution have resulted in a rapidly changing climate, ecosystem degradation, and loss of biodiversity.
The point is, we know the problem and we need to find the solution. The good news is that there are plenty of solutions, and many of those are working really well. We all just need to know which are the best. The purpose of the Porto Protocol that was launched last July with the endorsement of President Obama here in Porto was to create a platform for sharing and a movement. The Porto Protocol is a charity that is supported by sponsors and events, and all of you, by being here today, have already helped. But it's also a tool. It's a tool that can be used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Real case studies for real businesses that you can implement and adapt to your needs. There is no need for us to reinvent the wheel. We simply don't have the time.
As a farmer, I'm constantly confronted by the threats that are imposed by environmental instability. Exponential increases in carbon, plastic, and chemical pollution have resulted in a rapidly changing climate, ecosystem degradation, and loss of biodiversity. These changes have consequences for human health, such as rising prevalence of chronic diseases like obesity and diabetes. And in the United States, we have heightened understanding of the racial injustice that is the very basis of American agriculture. It's bud break here in the Mid-Atlantic, the second phenological stage of the season. Phenology is one of the more visible signs of a rapidly changing climate. For centuries, the cherry trees in Kyoto, Japan, have blossomed in very close parallel with seasonal temperatures. Since about 1980, however, that historical relationship has broken down. We're now seeing earlier bud break and other stages of phenology. When taken across an entire landscape, these changes have very significant implications for the functioning of the ecosystem. As a winemaker, I feel an obligation to do our part to solve these problems, and fortunately, there are many tools that are readily available to us. For example, here at Dodon, we have focused on building healthy soil as a way of adapting to and mitigating climate change. The central theme of our work has been to reduce our chemical and physical footprint in the vineyard while rapidly enhancing the biological footprint, especially the microbiological footprint. We accomplish this goal in 3 ways. First, by eliminating herbicides and substituting a roller crimper for a lawnmower, we stimulate native grasses and forbs to create diverse cover crops that produce abundant nutrient resources to sustain the microbial communities in the soil. The second way that we build healthy soils is by preparing compost made primarily from ramial wood chips that have been inoculated with indigenous microorganisms from surrounding healthy woods. This allows us to incorporate mycorrhizal fungi that are so important to transfer nutrients to the vines. The third way that we build the microbiological footprint is by integrating ruminants, sheep, in the vineyard system. Sheep are very, very efficient at utilizing cellulose and lignin materials to produce billions and billions of microbial decomposers. We've been very pleased with our results so far. This became readily apparent the other day when we planted a new block of Sauvignon in an area adjacent to an existing block of Chardonnay. The soil in the Chardonnay is nice and dark and rich and has good soil structure and plenty of organic matter. You can see from the color the amount of carbon that's in that soil. While the soil from the new block, which has had only turf grass and has not been treated in any way like we would the vineyard, is much more dry, friable, cakey, dusty, has nowhere, and of course the difference in color is just dramatic. This represents a difference of about 2.5% to 3% in soil organic matter between the new block and the existing block. If we extrapolate that difference across our 6.5 hectare vineyard, we estimate that we've been able to sequester about 270 tons of carbon dioxide annually. Just as we've seen increases in the soil organic matter in the vineyard, we're also seeing improvements in the nutritional composition of the wine. These two factors are related. Improving soil organic matter has been shown to result in increasing production of vitamin C, which in turn is reflected in the wine by a better acid balance, more tartaric acid, more freshness, and more vitality.
With this erratic weather that's been forecasted, we started looking at different options on how to recycle our water resources, how to use them more efficiently, reuse the water, but also we're looking at long-term activities in the replanting of vineyards and other projects on the farm to build in buffer capacity. So we are already working on different practices. We do mulching. We started 2 years ago to using chicken feathers as mulching on the berm of our vineyards, which cool the soil. It reduces evaporation. But as these feathers break down, it also releases nutrients to the plants. It also helps with the microbial and activity of the soil. So our soils are much more alive under the vines where we mulch. We mulch the feathers under the berm in the vine row. There's a lot of benefits with cover cropping. The biggest one is to create carbon into the soil as the plants grow and they break down during the new season. It helps with carbon management. One of our big challenges is in our specific soils with a low carbon is to get the carbon content up, and living mulches or living cover crops that becomes mulches is one of the easier ways to build carbon, because those, as the plants break down, the microbes incorporate them into the soil and you basically have an in situ composting operation. We have been using animals for the past 10 years, but we fine-tuning how we incorporate the animals in the vineyards. So the idea is that the animals graze the cover crops or sections of the cover crops, but the manure and urine helps with the fertility of the land. So we want to build that fertility into our systems.
As we all know, agriculture faces a significant challenge due to global warming. And seeking out the vineyards in such a region, I mean more humid, higher altitude, with higher availability of water, played a key role in the site selection for a sustainable project. Well, you figure out it's not an easy day in Serra da Estrela, but this is good to the vineyards and good in the long term for the sustainable project. Looking at our processes, the pruning generates a meaningful amount of organic waste. By local legislation, it is allowed to dispose of such waste by burning it, a common practice in local agriculture, or sending it to a landfill. Such practice is unacceptable according to our philosophy. Disposing of waste in landfills also corresponds to a direct loss of resources, which represents a loss of value in our view. Furthermore, in organic viticulture, we add natural compost to the soil to increase its nutrients, which we have bought in the market in high quantities, an expensive production cost. We have studied and analyzed different options for compost, and we have discovered in our neighborhood other farmers who produce a high amount of waste, either from poultry and rabbit production. They must pay to dispose of them in an environmentally correct manner. So, we decided to join efforts to start the production of a natural compost from our green waste combined with waste derived from these productions of the neighboring farms.
So some challenges that we have faced in farming, I think that I really look back as my family, 2019 marks my family's 100th consecutive vintage in wine. And during the 100 years, we kind of I've thought about the climate activity that's happened. And when you look back to when we began in 1919, our planet was just over 390 parts per million of CO2. It was just in the 1890s when the first carbon, coal power plant was invented, and then just shortly after that, you have the first combustion engine. It begins the kind of fossil fuel era, if you will. And in this period from 1919 to 2019, we've seen 120 parts per million. Basically, we've gone from right around 300 parts per million to now we're knocking on the door of 420 parts per million of CO2 in our atmosphere. And what we've seen is that, the last, call it 5 years, climate change has really become a massive negative. The years before that, of course, it was not as present. But in 2015, my brother and I lost half of our crop at RAEN due to drought and poor set. And my family, my father's winery Continuum, same. In 2017, my father's winery Continuum in Napa Valley lost 30% of its crop due to wildfires. And then 2020, we lost 60% of our crop due to smoke taint wildfires, and my father at Continuum lost 100% of his crop. So we have seen it go from warm weather creating fleshier, fatter vintages to warm weather burning around us in very terrifying ways. And I know my fiance makes wine in Italy. We actually make a little wine together at a property called Sori della Sorba. And we have seen similar effects with her winery at Agricola Brandini in La Mora and Barolo, where the hailstorms and the severity of weather has become greater. There's, in Italy, they call it a bomba di acqua. So it's not just wildfires, it's just everything in extremes: extreme heat, extreme rains, extreme dryness, extreme winds. And so it's become very challenging for people in farming to put out a good crop. We're in the wine business. We are blessed to be in the wine business, and I feel like in agriculture, we should be leading the charge on how we can make what's best for our planet economically superior. This is the challenge of our generation. We're the first generation where climate change is going to, I think this is actually a quote from Barack Obama. We're the first generation to see the effects of climate change in a negative way, and we're the last generation that can do anything about it. And so we have to work hard and quick to address this. And what I've done at RAEN, what Dante and I have done, and now a big team is helping do, is I began a challenge called the Monarch Challenge. And this challenge was a challenge to basically create awareness about how we farm, to protect our farm's biodiversity. And this was done via, and the reason why it's called the Monarch Challenge is because since the introduction of Roundup and glyphosate into our agricultural universe globally, here in California, we've seen a decline of the monarch population of butterflies by 99% since really 74 since glyphosate was introduced into the market. And monarchs are indicator species, so they indicate the overall health of an ecosystem, like the polar bears of the north or the wolves of Yellowstone. You can look to these indicator species and see if they're healthy. You can know that the overall ecosystem's healthy. If they're not doing well, then there's a good chance that we're having some other challenges. So if we can protect the indicator species around the world, then we can have a better, more biodiverse, healthy planet. And so the Monarch Challenge was a challenge to go out and create awareness within farming communities about, hey, let's get away from glyphosate, let's get away from these chemicals. And I quickly learned that, we quickly learned that there's an economic divide and a carbon footprint divide to farming in a clean way. Turning on one tractor is like turning on 14 cars. And so the more you drive it, the more emissions that you get put out into the atmosphere. And being organic and beyond, you have to drive your tractor more. So conventional farming was better for the climate, worse for the soil microbiome and farm biology. Organic farming, or clean farming, let's call it, was better for the soil microbiome and farm biology, but worse for our planet. This is not a path forward. We're seeing a biodiversity loss like we've never seen it before on our planet. And and this is a combination of climate and chemicals. And when you look at the chemical world right now, it's 5.6 billion tons of chemicals that are sprayed in agriculture each year. And when you look at emissions, agriculture is responsible for 9.3 gigatons, so 9.3 billion tons of CO2 being emitted into the atmosphere. And so we have to address these two things. And with this, and I never imagined myself being involved in a technology company, but with this challenge, I met some brilliant engineers out of Silicon Valley, and we've started a all-electric driver-optional smart tractor called Monarch Tractor. And this is a solution to the Monarch Challenge and so much more. It addresses the chemical aspect by being autonomy and being able to migrate away from a lot of dangerous chemicals, by being able to do the extra passes more detailed and more thoughtfully by being autonomous. Being electric means that those extra passes you need to do, you get away from the carbon footprint. And the most important thing is that we can become energy independent by being able to power our farm with the wind that we feel, with the sun that shines on our crops. And when you think about it, fossil fuel is just ancient, dug up sunshine. And so this allows for us to be much more efficient and thoughtful in how we farm.
And I wanted to talk to him today about Vin de Terroir, which is the underlying philosophy of winemaking in Burgundy in the face of climate change. And I don't think we've actually had this conversation before, Jacques, so why not right now? So I started working with you in 2003, and I remember you told me, I asked you one time when you realized that climate change was going to impact Burgundy. And that was the vintage you told me that you realized that climate change was real and happening.
03.
03, yeah.
03 was the first time we harvested in August, beginning of August. We began in August, and I thought we made wine that were not typical of Burgundy, were more New World. They were very ripe fruit, and that was different. So I thought we should think what we should do for the future to avoid that and stay as we are, Burgundy and wine of terroir.
Mm-hmm. And let's see, I remember, so in 03, obviously we didn't chaptalize, and chaptalizing was something that historically that was really necessary, and it's been somewhat up and down since then. But what do you see as the differences in terms of harvest characteristics in your career?
Well, I think the major difference is the global warming, as we harvest in general about a month earlier than in the 60s, and the fact that we don't need chaptalization. We have riper fruit, but the work is so much better done in the vineyard too. That has created changes, important changes too.
Mm-hmm.
But
so what do you think a winemaker can do to preserve the expression of terroir? I mean, there are two questions with climate change. On the one hand, there's adaptation and how we're going to change the way we work. And on the other hand, there's reducing our emissions and decelerating this heating trend. So what are the things that you are thinking about in terms of what this next generation...
In the winery or in the field?
Let's start in the field.
Well, the pruning, we are experimenting different approach of pruning. We should sure if we plan to use different rootstock to have late maturing as before we used to do the reversing, early maturing to avoid rot, because often October can be rainy. So that's in the vineyard major changes. In the winemaking, I think the key is the date of harvest. And I would like to experiment harvest rather early to avoid that over-ripeness and see the evolution in the complexity of the wine.
You've always believed in doing trials ever since the beginning. You've always done trials. Yeah. And now we're doing more and more trials that have to do with slowing down climate change. Even though in the 70s you were looking at rootstocks that would ripen earlier.
About extraction, we used, if you go to the 60s, 70s, the problem was to extract enough tannins, enough color, because the grapes were not very ripe. Today, this is not it's not anymore a problem, and so we move from probably 10 to 15 pigeage to 2 or 3. We have to adjust, and what should decide what we do is tasting the best. The evolution is in the winery. My feeling.
We're in the heart of a UNESCO biosphere. Now that's crazy biodiversity. We're talking 1,400 species just of butterflies in the Mont Ventoux area, and therefore a great opportunity to harness that credible force of nature and then work with it, not just in the vineyard, but also with all the cover crops that allow for us to have a microbial environment that's very exciting. It's almost a Jurassic Park of microorganisms that you don't find elsewhere. So right now, the biggest challenge that we have is to get local vignerons to understand how urgent it is to be moving along. And there's been a huge transformation, even at the AOC level, to really embrace the sharing of best practices. Our general approach has been to recognize that no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And when you're small and in a remote location like ours, it's, in our opinion, best to focus on choosing one area that you can really embrace and maybe take a real deep dive into. This place has always been a bit of a wine lab because there are many influences and people from everywhere. And I used to be director of programs in a think tank. I worked with David Rockefeller and others to try to find systemic solutions to big problems. But over here, what's important is to connect all that big picture work with bottom up. And what we're trying to do is focus specifically on the role of bees as one of the important pieces of the project. Now, people don't always associate bees with vines because we all know vines are self-pollinating and bees are essential to species that are cross-pollinating. However, bees can have a really important impact on two levels. First of all, through the air. Now we know that they can increase yields up to 30% without using chemicals. There's proven research that shows that not only do they help with that and spread indigenous yeast, but they also allow you to cut costs. It's cheaper to hire a beekeeper than to use all those chemical products. So already we're starting to look at the impact on financial sustainability, which we all know is the holy grail for winemakers. Now it gets better. Look at the impact of bees through the soil. We're doing research with UC Davis, University of Sussex, the French Agricultural Associations, trying to find ways to showcase how these bees can actually impact the final quality and value of the wine. So this is the way the theory goes. We know the bees impact the soils through these cover crops and help to spread them. Now the cover crops, in turn, we now know are essential to the life of the microorganisms. Those microorganisms have a symbiotic relationship with the plants. And not only are they helping to break down the soils and give them the nutrients they need, the plants the nutrients they need, which we know is essential to all forms of agriculture and plant life, but what's specific to viticulture and so interesting and exciting is how that can in turn allow for the transmission of the famous sense of place. Now, we've all seen these blind tastings with the geosensorial connections that you can make between vines that are or aren't cultivated in respect of their soils. And what's important is that then that opens the door for fine wine. We're talking about the famous Hugh Johnson definition of wines worth talking about, things that have meaning and purpose and allow you to be transported to that place through the taste of the wine. And that normally is rewarded by the marketplace and is a very exciting other dimension to add to those famous margins that are so essential for viticulture. So I wanted to contribute this project by collaborating with any winemakers around the world who shared our interest and our passion for working with bees and studying their effects on the soil. And I certainly hope that people around the world who are working with bees will get in touch with us, either because they want to share the experiments that they've done already themselves and collaborate on our research, or because they're thinking about using bees, and that will allow them to be useful to us because we can do a real before and after to study the impact of this protocol.
Since the early 90s, what I have noticed from the data and from the modeling and information that we've been doing is that climates are trending everywhere, not only in non-vineyard areas, but clearly in those places that are growing grapes and making wine. Temperatures have been trending across both the growing season and the winter period. We've seen changes in some seasonal precipitation patterns and characteristics, but we've also seen some changes in extremes, where we've had wider swings between really warm conditions, heat waves, to relatively cold conditions. For example, we've just recently had our first frost in a while, and the issue is that warmer winters cause earlier growth of the vines, therefore putting them in danger when we have frost risk. So we've seen this broad change in trends in temperature, but we've also seen an increase in variability, an increase in some extremes, especially in terms of temperature, drought, hail, and frost. And so the climate change that we've been seeing in the world's vineyards has also produced some challenges relative to many different aspects of growing grapes and making wine. Probably first of all is that we've clearly seen warmer growing seasons that have accelerated ripening. And what that does is we have a tendency to be more sugar ripe earlier in the season during the summer when it's really hot, and then not have all of the balance of flavors and aromas and everything that we like happening at the same time. So also really importantly, I left academia last summer to come to my family's vineyard here in the Umpqua Valley of Oregon. We grow about 76 acres of wine grapes here across a range of varieties from Tempranillo to Malbec to Albarino to Syrah. And we produce about 14,000 cases of wine. And we have honed in on our environment here to be able to produce the varieties that are best suited to the climate. But we've also made conscious decisions about what varieties were no longer suitable. We've removed them, and one of the things that I've done is I've put in 3 weather stations. We have 24 temperature sensors along with 40 soil moisture sensors that allow us to really monitor within vineyard kind of variability, and then how we can manage that through the vine architecture, pruning and training, and making sure that we are able to do the best we can within our varied landscape here. So in the big picture for me, being a climate scientist, I can tell you from what I've seen over the past 25 plus years is we clearly have a different climate that we're operating in today. And that different climate requires us to be much more aware and proactive in terms of how we might adapt and mitigate our businesses today.
What has changed is the attitude of our customers, and they are demanding that suppliers of the food that they buy or products that they buy change and look at counteracting the warming of the climate on Earth. At Villiera, we have many different projects that we've done over the years. It's often not what you do, but the sum total of everything that you do. But what I'm going to do is concentrate on one specific area that we have looked to make a change. We had vineyards in the past that were borderline. The yields were not great. The quality of the production was not great. And we realized if we could take the time that we put into these vineyards into other vineyards that were better performing, it made a lot more sense. It was easier to get a better yield. It was easier to get improved quality. And the best thing we could do was just pull these other vineyards out. And they happened to be in an area where there's a lot of land that was only really good for stock farming. You could have sheep or cattle. And we decided that we would rewild it. And this was 12 years ago. So we started by fencing the area and then bringing in animals that used to occur in this area in the past. And the thing in Africa is if you bring in big animals, you provide also a habitat for a myriad small things, for insects, for birds, for small reptiles. And so when you look after an elephant in Africa, you provide a habitat for thousands of other things. We have some big game here. We've got eland that get up to 1,000 kilos in weight. And to look after the animals, we needed to make sure, firstly, that the soil was in a good condition. Secondly, that the plants were the kind of plants that these animals would like to eat. We made sure that we got the soil back to as good a condition as possible. We started planting trees, and initially we thought, oh, if we plant 10,000 trees, when these trees are big, they'll consume all the carbon dioxide that we produce, turning 2,000 tons of grapes into wine. Well, those 10,000 trees were planted so easily that I stopped counting when we got to 100,000 trees. And so we've planted 31 hectares of forest. We've planted trees all along our boundaries so that we got green fences. And all of this is food for the animals. It's medication for the animals. It's a habitat for birds and insects. And there's no question about it, the vineyards benefit from it as well. As one knows, trees don't live on their own. They're social things. And for trees to really do well, they need a forest. But they also extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They put organic material back into the soil. They cool the atmosphere. They clean the atmosphere. They scrub dirt and pollutants out of the air. It's an opportunity to do good, feel good, but at the same time, make a difference. So the whole thing hinges on sustainability. We need to look at the economics of what we do. We need to look at the environmental impact, and we need to look at the social side of our business.
We are here in the extraordinary Douro Valley region in the northeast of Portugal, and we are a region which has been cultivating vines and producing port wine for over 3 centuries now. And there is a lot that we can learn from this experience. We are firm believers in dry land viticulture. And if we look at our past experience, there are 3 golden rules to be able to practice dry land viticulture. One is the choice of grape varieties which have been cultivated in this region in non-irrigated vineyards for centuries. Number 2 is the selection of your rootstocks which are drought tolerant, and we have a lot of experience with different rootstocks. And the 3rd rule is planting density, because if you look at our experience in the Douro, Our traditional vineyards have got a very high planting density in the order of 6,000 vines per hectare. And what do you get there? You get a lot of individuals all producing a small amount of yield, but the sum of many individuals gives you a satisfactory economical return. And we are all aware that with the shortage of water, that it is important to reduce the water consumption in our wineries. And here at the Villela Winery, we have a very good example where you can still make changes which have a large impact on the amount of water that you consume. We have behind me the must lines, which are used to transfer the grape must from the crusher to the different fermenters in the different part of the winery. And at this busy winery, we have 4 different lines, and a daily routine at the end of your crushing is to wash all of these lines. And that is individually the single most water consuming operation that we have. So what we did here is we changed the piping to a narrow gauge piping. The original piping that was used had 120 millimeter gauge, and we reduced it to 100 millimeters. Additionally, at the end of each day, we connected all of the different pipings for the washing to be done in a circuit, and the piping, which is the return piping bringing the water, was reduced to an 80 millimeter gauge. And with this, we were able to reduce, just for this operation, in 40% the water consumption at the Villela Winery. Together with other improvements like water guns, like a simple thing like placing every day on a chart the amount of water consumed, we have been able to reduce our overall water consumption by over 15% at the Villela Winery. I urge you to look at these installations, because with a simple replacement of these lines, you get a huge economy in the amount of water used.
Climate change down here in the Mediterranean region has been affecting us for more than a decade, giving us droughts, excessively hard frosts, hail and rain, more or less like everybody around the European basin. We've decided to tackle this in a number of ways. One of the ways that we decided to do it was building a cellar which would release a minimum amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. For that, we looked for a material which had already consumed CO2. We found hemp, the hemp plant, and we used the straw of hemp, which you can see in part of this brick, which I'm holding up here. And we mixed the straw of hemp with lime, and then we added a molasses-based fixer to coagulate it so that it fixed together. And then we put this through a mold to create a brick. All this is using vegetable material which has already consumed CO2. This construction of this building, because it's using hemp bricks which actually breathe, doesn't require any air-conditioned units. So we reduce the amount of fossil fuel energy that we need in order to keep our building cool, or warm as the case may be. And so therefore, once again, we're reducing the amount of CO2 which has been emitted from this building.
Our general approach to tackle climate change includes the creation of a carbon council internally that is gathering about 10% of our employees, all coming from different parts of the business. Together, we've conducted our first greenhouse gas inventory and are in the process of having it audited and certified ISO 14065. That group has also created 3 subcommittees. One is in charge of creating solutions to tackle our largest emission sources. Another one is in charge of internal and external communications. And a third one is in charge of refining our greenhouse gas inventory data gathering practices. Crimson is a signatory of the UN Race to Zero and are aiming to be carbon neutral. by 2050. The solution I want to talk to you about today was one of the first one, which was to reduce our glass weight. We understand that glass weight is responsible for 30 to 50% of the greenhouse gas emission of a bottle of wine. For this reason, we thought that this was where our first priority should focus. Indeed, we have reduced the first year our glass weight by 13%, which we estimate has led to a reduction of our carbon footprint by 8%. During that exploration, we've also discovered many other benefits beyond reducing glass use, such as simpler logistic, lower transportation footprint, and higher warehouse usage. Our big lessons for us was to drop our average bottle weight by 13%. Today it is 505 grams per 750 ml bottle. We've taken out about 300 tons of glass out of production every year. We've also reduced our transportation footprint from the glass manufacturer to our bottling line. We've relocalized all our sourcing domestically, cutting about 8,300 kilometers for each bottle transported. We got a little closer to a manufacturer and deepened our understanding of how glass is made. We visited a glass manufacturer, their factories, and discussed with them how we could reduce our glass weight and our transportation cost. The drop in glass weight is allowing us also to fill our trucking more efficiently, increasing the number of pallets we can put on our trucks. We were able to reduce by 30% the number of trucks on the road and store 30% more cases in our warehouses. To crown this, we haven't seen any market impact, except very few customers that have been asking questions about lightweight glass and usually are very happy to learn the reason why we did so.
I think the climate is a little more crazy. We can have very hot days in winter and very rainy days in summer, totally different from the past. Innovation and sustainability are very linked. Innovation is not only a question of value in economics, it's a question on value in environment, it's a question of value in cultural, it's a question of value in social. And I choose one of the examples of our sustainable projects that it's very trendy because sometimes our communication, our image about quality in wines is not only dependent on the product, on the liquid. It depends on the label, it depends on the packaging, and this is very important. And some links, for example, with heavy bottles and quality wines are nowadays strong and still very strong. Then our project is to change in 90% of our production the bottle, the weight of the bottle. Now we have a lighter bottle, but we want to assume that premium wines can have light bottles. And bottle is not the most important. The bottle, it means the size of the bottle, the shape of the bottle, and also the weight of the bottle is not the most important thing we can have in a wine. And more than that, we can have very good wines in quality that are packaged in sustainable bottles. This project is very trendy because we reduce around 90% of our carbon footprint.
So we're in Burgundy, where people have been making wine since the Romans, and Cistercian monks started the tradition of keeping different vineyards separate and fermenting them separately. And so now there are many, many generations, and that's part of the idea of terroir, is you're passing on a savoir-faire to the next generation. You don't actually, ownership is kind of, it's temporary. And so when you think about Jacques, your generation, then onto your sons and my generation, the next generation, what do you see will be their major focus of work? in the next 50 years?
Well, I think changes in the vineyard. I'm convinced that drone, I don't know if it's drone, will be the future. I feel that we will never not use any more tractors for spraying for against mildew or oidium or whatever. That will save going in with tractors in the vineyard. I'm pretty sure that the drone will be able to feel where is the need of spraying, and instead of spraying all the estate with protection against mildew, we could do a place and another place and another place where it's really needed. So I think that's going to be major. I believe in that. Maybe wrong. Maybe it will take 30 years, but I don't know.
No, I think we have to change quickly. It's hard to say what exactly will be the solutions and what will be the trends and what will catch, but certainly this is going to be a period of intense change and reorganization from infrastructure, from energy, from water use, from packaging.
Packaging too, yes. The cost of bottles and destruction of bottles, new bottles. I think that's enormous. It's sure I don't feel like drinking Romanée Conti or Richebourg or Chambertin in a can, but I think there is space for improvement regarding the world emission for a change in packaging.
No, it's the biggest budget in emissions for sure.
Perhaps the chemist Leslie Orgel said it best when he observed that evolution is cleverer than we are. We don't have all the answers. At Dodon, we look to nature for many of them, but it's also one reason why we were so excited to join the Porto Protocol, an international collaboration dedicated to finding solutions to the problems before us.
In addition, we can learn from other producers, identify potential solutions, and exchange impressions.
This is all about education. We have to create awareness about the challenges that we face. How can we make the challenges that we face, how can we overcome them and make that in a way that's viable for our planet to be successful? So.
Porto Protocol is an organization that was started to help share solutions to some of these challenges, both in the vineyard, in the winery, and all the way through to the consumer. And I've been very proud to be a part of the Porto Protocol to help guide some of the activities that the organization has been doing, because it's only through those organizations that we can learn the types of activities that other people are doing that help us think about what can we best do here to both respond to current climate change issues and think about the future.
And through the Porto Protocol, there are producers of wine that come up with ideas to combat climate change. And it's not necessary for people to go out and make many expensive mistakes. If one goes onto their website and looks what other producers are doing to solve problems that one might have in your business, you're sure to find an answer somewhere.
And Porto Protocol is a foundation that also helped us on this, because put a lot of producers together and we share beautiful ideas, and we really learn that it's not difficult to be sustainable, to work to a better and better environment in the future.
We're joining Porto Protocol because we believe that we need to share our actions. It is through sharing our actions that we can all gain greater knowledge of how to act better to create a positive impact on our planet.
And we invite all members of the wine industry to join us in this important work.
This is the right place and the right time to join Porto Protocol. Vamos transformar nossos negócios em modelos circulares, tal como a natureza. Sem perdas, sem resíduos.
I'm grateful for this journey that we're on, and I'm grateful for the Porto Protocol and to be a part of it with RAEN Winery, with Sorte della Sorba in Italy, and certainly encourage any farms that are thinking about it to join and to learn more about everything that we're doing at the Monarch Challenge, at Monarch Tractor, and all the beautiful agencies and companies that are out there that are trying to promote and create a better, more beautiful planet. So anyways, much love to Porto Protocol and to all the wineries and to all the people associated. And I'm looking forward to seeing some, I really do believe that we are going to be able to address this climate crisis we're in and the biodiversity crisis that we're in and the chemical crisis that we're in. I believe we are going to be able to do that, but we need people to act and need people to step up and make that difficult change. And that's why it's a challenge. It's pivoting away from fossil fuel tanks to solar panels and getting away from, so anyways, I'm grateful for everyone that is keen and interested in this and for everyone that's making the changes to do what's best for our planet.
I think the last thing to say is that Porto Protocol costs absolutely nothing. The cost of entry is just sharing your lived experiences and sharing them with colleagues. So I'd like to make one last request that everybody watching this video joins Porto Protocol. Rejoignez-nous et participez en échangeant avec des collègues. Please participate and exchange with your colleagues through Porto Protocol.
Junta-te a nós.
And we love Porto Protocol as a unique exchange platform that welcomes everyone. If you care about climate change, and if you are in the wine industry, you must join the Porto Protocol. There are no costs to you, and you will be connected with a very large network of wine industry friends that will challenge you and help your company reduce its carbon footprint.
I invite you to adopt this solution as well as other many great solutions that the Porto Protocol has enabled us to share between us. Good winemaking.
The great thing about the wine business is that it's a worldwide community, and we have the opportunity to band together to take important action. It's already happening in the Porto Protocol, which offers an important way to link arms and create impact. The world needs your help. There's no action too small. You count.
That's one of the many reasons I love working with the Porto Protocol, is because they're so good at bringing winemakers together, helping them educate each other. Our daughter Danielle has been doing their carbon workshop, and we feel very excited and hopeful that that's the only way we're going to get the critical mass that's going to get the attention of governments and regulators. So thank you so much. I hope that we'll be collaborating together. My motto is non mihi non tibi sed nobis. It's on our labels. It means not mine, not yours, but ours in Latin. And I think that the Porto Protocol really embraces these same values. Thank you, everyone.
So anyways, big up to the Porto Protocol crew and much love. Take care.